Hello and welcome to this demonstration of Collect Data Management for Infor Sun Systems. Collect is a solution that's been designed by Professional Advantage. Professional Advantage are one of the largest global development partners for Infor in relation to Sun Systems products. We provide organisations with process automation and modules that are designed to work closely with Sun Systems and are fully integrated at the database level. They offer a consistent upgrade path as you move forward with different versions of Sun Systems and technology layers in the background. The Collect Data Management solution offers comprehensive credit management within the Sun Systems framework. It relies on debtor accounts and transactions that have been posted into Sun Systems. Users can automate and streamline the credit control functionality, improve on their productivity, and bring an immediate cost and management benefit to the organisation. Processes within the system allow for manual interaction with customers and also automation of key processes such as the generation of statements and the generation of letters. We are now going to take a look at Collect, and in this demonstration we have customised the solution to allow for some ideas around the requirements that have been specified by SDA globally. The first thing we're going to look at is logging into Collect and the various methods by which you can deploy Collect into your environment. Collect can be installed as a thick client on a user PC or as a 3-tier thin client application on a Citrix or terminal server if this is the preferred methodology. In this case, I have Collect installed on a server, and I'm going to access this through the Start menu and the Collect icon. When we log into Collect, we are asked to enter a username and password. These are controlled by Sun Systems Security. A username needs to exist within Sun in order for it to be usable within Collect. If you change the passwords within the Sun Systems environment, this is automatically picked up by Collect. In this case, I'm going to log in as the user SUN. When I log into Collect, I'm presented with the System Home screen. This is the area where users can decide which functionality they wish to use and access information about debtor accounts and debtor processing as required. Within the system, down at the bottom, we can see the user that has logged into Collect. We can also see the business unit that is currently active within the system, and also the current period of that business unit and the ledger that I'm looking at. Should I wish to change those, I'm able to use the File menu to use the Change Business Unit function and select from any business units that are available within the system. If you add a new business unit into Sun Systems, this will automatically become available for configuration within Collect. This is part of the deep Sun Systems integration. We also get to choose the ledger, and any ledgers that are available within Sun Systems will become available within Collect. Once we are in Collect, the user is presented with the work area. At the top of the screen, we have a number of tabs, and these tabs allow them to access different bits of functionality depending on what they're trying to achieve at any one time. A common place to start work in the day is the workbench, or potentially going to your to-do list, where this would show you any activities that you have planned for the day that are decided upon based on prior activities that you've entered into the system. The workbench within Sun Systems Collect is an area where we can go and examine details for an individual account that is held within Sun Systems. All of the accounts within Sun are available from the drop-down. This is an automatic integration. Accounts that are made visible can be filtered based on the account type. Here we are filtering out by debtor, balance sheet, and client accounts. For this demonstration, we are using data that has been provided by SDA for an African university. All student names and debtor records have been changed for privacy. Within the system, if we hit the drop down here, we will see a list of accounts, and for this data, all student accounts, which are in effect the debtor accounts, are held starting with a prefix of S. When I hit the drop down, you'll see that it is now filtering the data based on that S. This integration is automatic, and hence if you add a new account into Sun, it will automatically become available within Collect. When we use the search within Collect and choose a student account, it will automatically bring forth data that is held within Sun Systems and other data that has been linked to the account within Collect. In this case, we can see that there are a number of tabs along the top where this data can be displayed. One of the important areas in this is contact details. Contact details are held within Sun Systems and set up within Sun Systems. They will automatically then be made available in Collect due to the Sun Systems association with the debtor. You can see here that we have one contact. If I hit the drop down, we can see there are a number of contacts associated with this particular account. These contacts can be categorized depending on who they are. You can see that Azarina Abuli is actually the parent of the child, as we've set up a number of categories. This category indicates that they are parent, whereas if we go into the student themselves and choose that particular contact, the category changes to student. This is a very useful piece of functionality that we are able to use in Collect so that we can start to segregate and report on data in a more effective fashion. What this also means is if we are contacting this customer or client or student in this case in relation to some debt or outstanding payment, etc., we immediately have the required contact details available to us within the Collect screen. Here we can see the preferred contact method has been defined as phone. We have the address, we have the category and other details such as phone number or email address if this is relevant. If there is any comment held against the contact, it will also appear here. If we decided we wanted to contact the student, we have the record here. If we wanted to contact the parent of the student, I've also added that as a particular record within the system. You can see that the account code is linked to the contact code by using a similar account referencing format. However, I've actually, for this example, added PAR for the parent record, and also we have a student sponsor record in here. This is an example of some of the things that you could actually think about doing within Collect to enhance the way that you use the system and to enhance your business process. If we hold parent records, sponsor records against the student within the system, it means we can potentially generate letters, generate statements and other communications and notes against that particular user if it's something related to the student. Bear in mind that you would have to set up these records in Sun Systems in order to have that effectively provided to you. If we look at this contact record, we can also then move along and have a look at more broad information about this particular customer. If we go into the customer detail record, this will actually show information that is held in Sun Systems in the account record, but also in the customer detail record. We are made aware that within the standard SDA setup, most people are using only the chart of account record or the debtor record for their students. In potentially extending this functionality, we may want to start using the customer record within Sun Systems. This is an extended record linked to the chart of account that allows us to capture more specific information about that person or that company as a particular debtor. In this case, you can see that we're bringing through things such as the payment method by check, the status of the customer, payment terms that have been associated to it, and any potential default contact details. And more importantly, within the customer record in Sun, we have the ability to set things such as credit control records, blocking credits, credit checks, credit limits, things along those lines. These all become useful within Collect when you utilize them as part of your debt collection process. In the middle of the screen, what we also have here is some account or customer analysis dimensions. Within the SDA data, we've been told, and it does seem to be true looking at the data that we have, that most branches seem to only have one analysis dimension set up. This dimension is called class, and students are all categorized with a 134 type. This is defined within Sun Systems and added to the contact record account. One of the benefits of utilizing account analysis dimensions is that you are able to, within Collect, report on a group of students based on this particular record. So class, for example, we could draw out all the students in the system by looking at 134 code. One area where we feel there could be a better use of Sun Systems functionality, and indeed a better use of Collect if it were implemented, is through the expansion of the use of analysis dimensions. We've actually set up some examples here that we believe could potentially be useful to you in the debt collection process. For example, by adding extra dimensions to the account, we could have the dormitory rate held against that particular student. So where rates vary, that becomes obvious and is easily seen within the debt collection process. We can see if there's a student sponsor associated to this, and we've added the student sponsor name, in this case a chap called Lee Chan. We've tagged the account whether or not they're Adventist. So for example, if I hit the drop down here, you can see we have a no or a yes record set up within Sun Systems. We have the country of residence, and we also have the graduated yes or no flag. These are examples that we feel could be beneficial. For example, you could actually report on all your students by country of residence, or all students that were Adventists and all students that were not. You could have a look at students that had a sponsor, or maybe if they had graduated or not. We are led to believe that some of the debt collection process does actually rely on things such as whether there's been a post or pre-graduation interview set up, and that could actually lead to a better way of dealing with debt that's outstanding prior to graduation. So these sort of flags become very important and useful within the system if you were to define them. These things are very easily set up within Sun Systems once you understand how this can be done. Another record that we may use along the top here is the statistics function. Statistics actually brings forth from Sun Systems the outstanding data in relation to transactions that have been posted against this particular student account. We can define different types based on journal types that have been entered into Sun, so we can see what was posted as invoices, receipts, interest, etc. And then this derives back into an easily understood area details that could be useful in a communication or a conversation with the student or their sponsor. We can see the date of the last invoice, how old it was, what the amount was. We can see when the last receipt was raised. We can also have a look at things like the average days to pay, days sales outstanding, and the year-to-date, period-to-date totals. All of this means that at your fingertips you have information that better informs conversations that you may have with the student. Another area that we could look at is a transaction listing. This transaction listing allows us to see all transactions that have been posted into the student account over time. Typically, this will show unallocated transactions. This means transactions in some systems that have not been linked together, for example, a credit against a debit. It is also our understanding that in most cases, SDA use a rolling balance method. This means that there is no direct allocation of invoices against receipts, and rather the account balance at any one time is examined. We would think that there could be some benefit going forward in instigating the use of account allocation in order to link receipts against invoices and have a more granular understanding of the data that we're looking at. It also means that within Collect, when you look at unallocated transactions, such as these here, you would only be seeing transactions that are invoices or receipts that have not been linked against one another. This would certainly improve the process and make for better reporting. We also within here have a list of all notes that have been associated to this account over time. One of the key benefits of Collect is the ability to capture communication in the form of a note that can be held against the account or against a transaction. Then, when we look at this list, we can see all communication, the outcome of that communication, and what was actually set up as potentially actions that needed to be followed up over time against a particular contact. We will come back to notes in a minute. Within the workbench, we have very strong functionality for providing all sorts of information. One thing that most people tend to like is the aging functionality. This allows us to use a date and age the transactions within the account by that date. It will then bring back the balances for the account held against different aging bands. These aging bands can be defined within the system to reflect whatever you like. So for example, in here we have 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, etc. Although you could have 2 days, 4 days, 12 days, whatever would be required. You can see that for this student, Aline, we have 30-day balance sitting at 1,979 random francs. Down below we have some at 120 days. This again informs our decisions, informs our communication with that particular student. Over on the right hand side we have the ability to drill down into any of these aging bands. So if we have a look at the 110 to 20 day figure and double click, the transactions here then reflect that outstanding band. This is a good example of how account allocation could improve the situation for you, in that by clicking on this band we are now only seeing transactions that sit at that date range and those that would be outstanding if you had allocated any that were already closed off. When we go back into the 30-day band we have a number of transactions. If any of these had already been paid, we would have allocated them off and they would not appear here. This gives you very good granularity within the system. One of the powerful functionalities within Collect is the ability for the user to perform account allocation from within the Collect interface without having to go into Sun Systems. In order to perform account allocation within Collect, we can do this from within a student or data record. We are in the Aline Azarana account, and if I go into the Transactions tab, this will show us all available transactions currently sitting within that account in Sun Ledger. Some of these transactions may be invoices, others may be receipts. We may want to allocate receipts against invoices in order to make them disappear from the outstanding debt situation. Once we are in the grid, we can go to the allocation function at the top of the screen. When we click allocation, it will take the transaction we've selected and then allow us to choose other transactions we may wish to match against this. For example, If I go in and choose this library fees entry and then click allocation, you'll see that it will then bring up a split screen. At the top of the screen, it shows the transaction that I've chosen, and at the bottom of the screen, we have the other transactions available within the account. If I then sort through these and find a suitable transaction that we wish to push against this, for potential that one, if we then go and add it to the top screen, this is then a potential allocation. Allocations need to balance to 0 in order for the functionality to completely function. I can then close this and it will immediately allocate these two transactions against each other in the Sun Systems ledger using an A marker. This is exactly the same as Sun Systems functionality if you were using the account allocation tool within the Sun Systems interface itself. In this case though, we have not had to jump into Sun Systems to perform this allocation. Another benefit that we may want to utilize within the system is the ability to split transactions. So for example, if we have a part payment against an invoice or some such, we may want to break the transaction up so that we can allocate the part payment against the part invoice. By choosing the invoice in question, we can then go and click the split function at the top of the screen. This will allow us to then decide how many splits we wish to push into the transaction. In this case, I may want to split it 2 times, 3 times, etc. And I can decide if it's going to be equal splits or indeed a split that passes the transaction over a number of dates. So for example, I may decide that I want to produce a payment plan where the invoice itself is broken up over a number of weeks. To do this, I could actually choose the number of weeks, in this case 4, choose a start date, and then decide how I wish to split this, maybe weekly. So when I choose to split, it will now split the transaction into 4 weekly payments and actually assign a due date to each payment within the system so that we can then see that in our granular display of the transactions. Equal splits, you can see that it now breaks that down correctly based on the due dates that need to be assigned. This is other powerful functionality that many people utilize within Collect to allow them to better manage their debtor transactions. I will now close this screen and it will immediately break it up and allow us to see the way that split should be seen. Transaction analysis and transaction information is shown within this grid, and you can see that all fields that are held within Sun Systems are displayed to the user. The user does, however, have the option to edit the columns and decide which columns they would like to have appearing on the screen, and that includes things such as transaction analysis or T codes, account dimensions that we were discussing before, and customer dimensions as well. This can be set as default for the user if required. Within the grid, we also have a function to allow us to report on it, so we can extract the grid and send it to an Excel spreadsheet if we require, and we can also sort in the grid up and down by any of the columns, or indeed filter using the little filter symbol. When I click the symbol, we can then decide to add a custom filter, and this can use the likes of like, does not equal to, is not like, etc., and you can have up to 2 filters applied to any one column. We can also move the columns around if required, and indeed group them. So for example, if I wanted to group this by period, I could drag it up into the grey area and let go, and I now have balances by period. And I could continue to do this in the same form as a pivot table in Excel. So I can bring up reference, and I now have period by reference. Grid functionality allows users to easily manipulate transactions and understand what is going on within the system. We can also, within the grid, if we wish, set due dates on a transaction. So if a due date needs to be changed, we can do that within Collect without having to go into Sun Systems. Additionally, there is some ability to add drill downs to external systems from within Collect. So for example, if the invoice was generated elsewhere and then pushed into Sun, we could drill down into an external system that was responsible for producing the invoice and actually show a copy of that. Drill downs can be set up against Sun System Sales Invoicing, or against CSB, or indeed a custom drill that we can create against any other SQL source within the environment. Transaction details are part of the workbench functionality, but can also be shown as part of reporting if required. One of the key functionalities within Collect is the ability to capture notes and communication against an individual customer or student. Note functionality within Collect allows us to record any communications that we have with the debtor or student over time. For example, if we are following up a payment requirement or something where an invoice has not been paid by the due date, I may want to contact the student and then record a note to discuss what I have actually heard from them at that point. So in order to do that, I can go and access the account code. I can look at the contact details to work out who I'm going to contact about the particular issue in hand. And once I've decided, look at that information. I can then go into the notes area and click New Note. This allows me to add a note to the system. Notes can be recorded at the account level or have attached transactions associated to them. First of all, I choose a contact, in this case the student. I can then go and decide the date, and obviously today's date is the date I'm recording this particular note. In the system, we have action codes available. Action codes are defined in order to allow you to break down and categorize the type of note you are adding. You can add as many action codes to the system as you like. In this case, I have a number of examples that are pretty standard within a Collect implementation, such as call debtor, check for payment, but then I've also added a few that are examples of what we think you could actually use within the system. Things such as email to sponsor, or maybe fee reminder letter, pre-graduation interview note, things like that. Really, it is up to you what you create, and anything you add allows you to report and break down the way you have added and captured notes in a much more granular fashion. I'm going to add a call debtor note. Once I've done this, I'm going to add in whatever the text is. So in this case, it could be that I've called the student. They said they would pay next week. And now all I need to do is save the note. Once I've saved the note, you can see that at the top here, we also have an action date. The action date by default is today. This means I've already taken the action. However, I may want to actually add a follow-on to this, whereby when I've communicated with the student, I've said that I will chase them again in a week's time. This is quite an important functionality within the system, as I need to have a reminder in my to-do list to ensure that I do carry out these actions at the right time when I come in the morning. So, by assigning an action date, potentially on the 17th, I'm now saying that this action should occur in my to-do list on the 17th of February. There is also the ability to record a promise date. Promise dates allow us to break down when they have promised to pay and if they have missed any promises and start reporting on this basis. They may or may not be used. It is just something that is optionally there and available to add for reporting quality to your environment. I'm now going to save the note. Once the note is saved, I have some other options. Firstly, down at the bottom, I could go and add some documentation. This means that if I have a letter from the student, or maybe a letter I've sent them, or perhaps even an email message that I want to drag in here and attach, I can do so. Once I've added it into the note, it is then available and made visible to any users who may open the note in future and adds to my audit trail, and of course gives me more information about what occurred at the time. Optionally, I could also add an attached transaction to this note. This would mean that I can see that we are talking about particular invoices rather than the general balance of the account. To do this, I can go up to the top, hide my attachment section at the bottom, and then go to Attach Transactions. This then gives me a screen where I can drag transactions that may be associated to the note up and attach it to the note. Once I've done so, I can save the note, and this means that transaction is permanently associated to it when I go back to look at it in future. If I look at the note body, we also now get a summary of the note inserted into the text. This means that if I just look at the note in a very open fashion, I can see that there is an attached transaction rather than just being an account level note. Once I've saved the note and added it in, if I look at the listing, we now see that there is a list of notes here that over time have been added to this account, and the top one is my new note. There's an action date on the 17th. You can see the note information here, and I can also see whether the note is flagged as done. If a note is flagged as done, it will disappear from this list. So over time, I will tick in any notes that I've actually acted upon as done, and they will disappear. Once I have created notes, if I go back to my workbench and imagine that I've completed my work on this account for the day, the next step is that when I come in on the morning of the 17th, I want to check if there are any things that I've actually already specified I will do on this day. On this basis, Collect provides a to-do list. If I go into the to-do list functionality, I can see a listing based on either actions, users, or dates as to the notes that I've actually said I will follow up on today. So I have a look at list by actions. This means that I now see a list of all the actions outstanding for me within the system, broken down by the action code. You'll notice that at this stage there is no dates associated. This is a complete list of all actions that I may take going from this date forward. If I want to see it at a date level, I can go and have a look by date. Then have a look at this tab, and it provides me with a calendar. This calendar shows me the actions that I've actually assigned to a particular day. You can see that on the morning of the 10th of February, I had one cheque payment action outstanding. On the morning of the 11th of February, I have one cheque payment action outstanding. We have a look at the 17th, I could potentially have actions on this day as well. So these are a way of flagging me to take actions before they are actually due or before they are overdue by just examining my calendar. I can also filter the calendar based on the user that the note has been assigned to, the action in question, and other information as well. If I wanted to have a look at what that particular action was, all I need to do is double click. This will open the note, and indeed I can open it further by using the right click function to show me the note detail. When I read the note detail, this will remind me what it is that I've said that I will do, and therefore I'm able to then go and take that action and potentially add further notes to then explain what happened as part of that follow-up. The note functionality is very powerful within Collect, and it is something that everybody uses in order to improve their communication, the auditability and the control they have around their debtors. It is one of the key functions that attract people to the Sun Systems Collect function. Collect has a number of functions that allow us to generate statements and dispatch these to a student or customer. The first of these is statement generation on demand. In order to send a statement on demand, we again utilise the Collect Workbench functionality. Coming into the Workbench and choosing a student account, we may have decided it is time to send them a statement, or perhaps they have requested that we send them one. In order to do this, we go and click the button on the top ribbon called Statement. This then opens a dialog where we can fill in a number of selections depending on what we want to do with the statement generation. The first choice we make is the choice of the statement format. Collect allows us to design and build as many statement formats as you require. These can have your own layout, your own text, and of course your own logo as needed. I'm going to choose the test statement we have designed called Data Statement SDA. We then choose how we wish to sort the data on the statement. For example, is it sorting it by transaction date or by reference, etc. We choose the account. In this case, it's pre-populated from the Workbench account that I've chosen. And we decide what contact we wish to put onto the statement. Is it our default contact or a particular contact? And indeed, which client contact we want to use. In this case, we have the student themselves, but we also have the student sponsor set up as a contact against the account. Potentially it is that contact we wish to add to the statement. This shows the advantage of having multiple contacts associated to the account. In this case, I'm going to choose the student. We can then add a statement comment, and we can also go and make further selections based on things such as transactional information, journal types. We can use allocation markers, analysis dimensions, and T-codes, ledger dimensions as well. But if we just want a general statement, I will leave it open. Once I've done this, at the top of the screen I have the option to preview it on screen, to save it off, or maybe email it directly as a PDF or an RTF to the contact we've chosen. If I was to choose email, it would utilise the contact email address based on the contact that we've filled in at the bottom here, and then send the statement as an attachment in the email directly out to the student. There is no need to print this off and post it if you are utilising this functionality. I'm going to preview it on screen. As you can see, we have actually used the Collect standard statement and added in one or two extra fields for representation of the data we are using. So for example, you have your own address, you have the student address coming through from the contact information in Sun, we've added a logo here, and the system is just breaking down a list of all outstanding transactions within the account. Again, it is useful to be using account allocation here in order to get rid of those transactions on the statement that may be related to payments. However, if you wanted to include them, by choosing the right allocation markers, these can certainly be included. At the bottom of the statement, we have some aging days, breaking down the age of the transactions in the account, and this default statement has a remittance advice that could potentially be torn off if that was important to you. However, obviously, this design can be set up in any way you wish. At the top of the screen, we have the ability to save statements off into PDF, into Excel, into Word, and other formats as well, if this is required. Statement generation on demand is a very useful tool that comes along with Collect. Within Collect, there is a function called search sets. Search sets are a way by which users can run inquiries against the transaction and static data within the system and return listings of accounts that need to be actioned based on the criteria they've entered into the search set. Search sets are very flexible and allow for many parameters to be entered to extract the correct data. In order to access search sets within the system, we can click on the search sets function from the main menu. When we enter this area, we have a list on the left-hand side of predefined search sets that have been set up and then made available to individual user groups. These predefined search sets mean that where things are used regularly, a user can access them immediately without having to fill in any parameters to identify the correct results. Additionally, a user can run an ad hoc search set, which is where the parameters can be filled in on the fly to return the information required at that point in time. Predefined search sets are very useful. In most cases, you would see common ones such as debtors 120 days over, debtors 30 days over, things along those lines. This would return a list of accounts where that criteria was met. Additionally, however, you could define extra search sets with more detailed information and search criteria that meet the business requirement in various ways. For an example, in this list, we've got a search set that returns students that have a debt balance that have also been flagged as graduated, or maybe where they've been flagged as Adventists, or any other combinations of information that may be identifiable based on the account in question. This is an example where you are benefiting from the use of analysis dimensions that we discussed earlier. So by defining an account as having a dimension that perhaps flags it as being an Adventist account or a graduated student or of a particular rate, etc., all of those things can be added into a search set to return the correct data. This is why these are so powerful and highly recommended as an approach going forward. If we run one of these search sets, maybe the 120-day over search set, you'll see that because it's predefined, we do not have to fill in any criteria. Instead, the user can just run the search set. This will perform a search and then return some results. If I go and click on Process Search Sets, View Search Results, we can see that we've got a set of search set results, 120 days over, and it's giving me a list of accounts where that criteria is met. You can see a balance of the transactions here, the number of transactions that make up that balance in each account. And from the results of this search set, I have a number of actions I could perform. First of all, I can look at individual accounts. So by clicking on the account, you can see that down at the bottom of the screen, it will be showing me some basic information in the same form as the account analysis that we've been looking at earlier for each of the accounts that I want to look at. Additionally, up at the top of the screen, we have options that can be changed. Therefore, if we look at the account for Aline, we could be viewing the account details at the bottom. Or, potentially, we could view the transactions that make up that particular balance. In this way, we can jump from a hit list of accounts that have been generated by the search set, work through them in terms of looking at the account information, and then going and potentially looking at the transactions, etc. And then maybe moving from there towards raising notes, communicating with the customer, etc. as required. In this way, you can see how search sets can be defined in order to allow you to have a hit list to work on every day. Your first action in the day may well be to go and have a look at your to-do list, have a look what's outstanding for that particular time, and then go and do those actions you've already predefined for the day. The second step may be then to go into search sets, run a search set for those accounts that were now creeping into overdue or meet certain criteria, and that is then going to give you your hit list for the accounts that you need to start working on and potentially raising notes and then generating further actions down the road. Search sets are very powerful in this respect. If we wanted to run a more detailed search set, this one here, Adventist only, for example, I could run this. Again, it's going to return a list of accounts. However, this time, the accounts are for students where they are flagged as Adventists. So in this case, they have met that criteria, and the account itself indicates that that is the case by the analysis dimensions that have been assigned. I hope you can see from this how the use of analysis dimensions could enhance the running of search sets. For an ad hoc search set, if we jump up to the top here, we actually get the option to fill in all of the criteria related to the search in question. We can obviously choose based on a range of account codes, if that was required. We can also enter non-contiguous or cherry-picked ranges where we say A and not D, but Z, etc., things along those lines. And most of these fields can also do that. We can choose by account type, account balances. Maybe we want to have a look at things where they're above their credit limit by a certain amount or a certain percentage. We can have a look at all the account dimensions. So in this case, where I was running the one that actually used the Adventist only flag, I'm looking at the account dimension, is Adventist, and saying yes in here, which means only accounts that meet that criteria are met. Moving down, we also have the ability to use account priorities and additionally transaction criteria, so journal types, journal sources, references, allocation markers, things along those lines. Obviously, within the Sun Systems world, transaction analysis or T codes are very important. So depending on the T codes that you have defined within Sun Systems, you may want to actually extract accounts where there are transactions that utilize those T codes. In this data we are using, there are a number of T codes already set up, things like fund, function, restriction, and again you could select based on the codes that exist already within the Sun Systems environment. Moving down, aging criteria is quite an important function. We may want to extract accounts where the transactions within it hit certain aging bands. Therefore, we get the list of all the aging bands we've already defined within the system, and we could use those on an ad hoc basis. Or we can define a custom aging band, where maybe we're looking for transactions that are minus a certain number of days to plus a certain number of days, something along those lines. So that means we do not have to use just purely the aging bands that are predefined in the system. This is the most basic set of search criteria you could enter. However, we obviously want to be able to look at more complex scenarios where maybe people have been contacted. Perhaps we want to see a list of accounts where there has been a call made to them in the last week, or maybe where they've had a reminder letter sent, things like that. And all of those elements rely on the notes that have been added to the account and hence the action codes associated. If we move down to the notes criteria area, this is where we can fulfill those requirements. So I could say only extract a list of accounts where on the account there is an action code associated to it, maybe check for payment, and even a range of action codes if I wanted to, and that action date had been associated to the account a certain relative number of days from the point at which the search set is run. So I could say action date 0 plus, that means as of today. Or I could say minus a certain number of days, weeks, or months from now. So potentially here, if I said days, this would mean extract accounts where a check payment action had been added to them within the last 6 days, or the last 6 weeks, for example. I could do a relative date and a range of dates here, and additionally, I could start working with promise dates. So when we were looking at notes, you could see there that we may want to put a promise date in to say that the customer or student would take an action at a certain point in time. Here, we could say, let's extract where there has been a promise added to the system within a certain relative day range. We also are able to decide whether or not any of those notes need to be done or not done, etc. We can also extract transactions where accounts contain more notes matching the following criteria as well. So you can add multiple criteria to the selection. This allows you to answer very complex questions when you fill in all of the criteria that may require. However, an end user may find this slightly complex, and therefore, if you do have criteria that need to be fulfilled regularly, it will be best perhaps to define a predefined search set and make that available to the users so they don't have to fill in the detail. Search sets are a very useful function, and most people utilize them in order to make their days more effective and organized.
One of the big benefits of search sets is that the data they return can then be passed on to a process action, and a process action could be statement generation as a batch or letter generation as a batch. We are now going to look at statement generation. In order to pass a batch of accounts that have been selected through a search set onto a process action, we would run the search set in the normal fashion. So for an example, I will now run the Adventist only search set. Once this is completed, we can then access this through process research results, and we have a list of accounts. This list of accounts may all be appropriate for the sending of a statement. So you could imagine that we had a search set up and designed to extract a list of accounts on a monthly basis potentially that we wanted to send a statement out to. Once that result set had been returned, we would then click the Process Action button at the top of the screen. When we do this, the system shows a list of the process actions that have been predefined in the background. In this case, I've set up a process action for a student letter, a process action for a sponsor letter, and a process action for sending a statement. But you can define as many of these as you like, depending on the output that you are trying to achieve. We also have an ad hoc process action where we can fill in the criteria and decide what we want to do on the fly. In this case, I'm going to click the Statement Send process action and click OK. Once that's done, the system will then show the parameters that have already been filled in for that particular process action. So you can see here that we've decided that we are going to generate a statement, and I've ticked the button to indicate that we're going to create it, and we have a statement issue date capability. Typically it would choose today's date as the day. However, we could actually offset that and say we want the statement issue date to be maybe a day from now, or 2 days from now, or maybe even a week or a month from now. We also have a capability of putting a default comment onto the statement, and we can choose which statement template we want to use to push this out. If you remember looking at statements on demand, this is very similar functionality. Below this we have the letter generation function for process actions, and I will come back to that later. We then have to decide what we're going to do with that statement once it is generated. The most common option would be to email the statement out to the student or the sponsor or whoever is relevant on the fly for every account that appeared in the hit list. To do this, we tick the emailing function. We can decide if we're going to CC or BCC the letter to somebody else as well, and we can define the subject line for that particular statement email and the body. You can see here that I've actually said student fee statement, and I've given a little text that would appear in the email to say please find a statement below. If you have any queries, please contact student admin. We can then decide how we're going to attach the statement to that email. Is it going to be attached as a zipped or an unzipped file, or maybe we don't want to attach the email at all. The system also allows us, if we wish to, add that particular document into what is known as the Collect data storage. This means that all letters and statements that are generated by a process action are held in the database and can be accessed at a future point in time. I've set this to always generate letters and statements. If you wish, you could also add a printing option, so we can print out statements, maybe where they've been emailed, or potentially where they haven't been emailed. These are general options that the user can choose on demand. One of the more interesting functions around batch generation of statements, beyond sending them out to the individual involved, is the ability to add a note onto the account to indicate that a statement has been generated. The same would go for if we were generating a letter. Here, I can turn on this function and then choose which action code will be applied to the note that is created. I have an action code here saying student statement sent. That is an obvious option to use. I can then give it an action date, in effect saying, on the account, is there an action that needs to be followed up on that would appear on my to-do list based on the generation of this statement. I'm going to leave the action date as today. I'm not going to give it any relevant range, but what would be interesting is when it adds this note, I would like to attach to it the transactions that appeared on the statement, so I can see within the system what transactions we were talking about when we generated that statement. I may want to say that the note is actually done, meaning that I don't have any action to follow on from it, and I also want to attach a copy of the actual statement to the note, so it would appear in the attachment email area at the bottom of the system, and I will be able to open this when I look at the note. I could assign a contact to the note if I wanted to, so perhaps I want to say that it's going to be in my area, and I could also assign a contact category to the note. You may remember that earlier I was talking about the fact that within Collect we can classify customer or student contacts by a category. I've set up a number of these. We have the default one, no contact assigned, but I also have student, parent and sponsor as a contact category. This is quite useful because by using these I can actually say that the contact name and address and details that will appear on the note when I get it associated could be the parent, the sponsor or the student associated to the individual account in question. This means that we can automatically select the correct one based on the type of statement or letter I'm generating. In this case, I'm going to say it is the student. What we can also do is create a follow-on note. This means that beyond the initial note that will be generated to say that a statement has been associated and it's set to done, I can also say that there is a follow-up note that maybe occurs a couple of days later. Some people use this to say, I want to follow on and ring them up and say, we've sent a statement, did you get this, and are you ready to pay us? So here I'm going to say an action, call the client. I'm going to say add this 2 days from now. I'm going to attach the statement to it, and I'm going to say it is coming to myself. It's still the student that I'm interested in, and the comment that I may add to this note could be follow up on statement. I'm now ready to run the batch process. This I can do by clicking the run function at the top of the screen, and it will then go through and create the statement for each account that was generated in the search set results, and then send these out the door and also create the notes that I've specified. You can see that we've already performed the search and the review. We're now performing the search set action. Now that the processing action is complete, we can see that it tells us that that is the case, and we can close the process batch. We now know that those statements have been generated, notes have been created against the accounts, and the email has been dispatched. If we go and have a look at the workbench and go and examine one of our accounts, we should find that there are some new notes associated based on that generation. One of the accounts, Aline, should have been included in that search. If we have a look at our list, we can see that what has happened now is that 2 new actions and notes have been associated. The first one was associated to today's date. We can see that it was flagged as done, so it's not actually going to generate a follow-on action, and it was associated to as arena in terms of being the student category for the contact associated to the account, and that the action code was statement sent. That's what indeed it does say. The second note, which is the follow-up note that I specified, is a new note with an action date 2 days from now, which is a call to follow up on the statement sent 2 days prior. And again, we've associated it with the student contact category. So this note would appear in my to-do list and will be something I would need to do when I came in on the 12th. If we open one of these notes, what we should find is that associated to it we have some attachments. So if I click the attachments option, down at the bottom you can see we have a statement PDF file associated to it automatically. If I go and open that from here, we would immediately go and see a PDF, and the PDF would be the statement file that we've generated and sent out via email. As you can see, this is using the same format as we predefined when we were looking at statements on demand, and it has selected the correct contact category for the statement, being the student themselves, because that was the category that I selected. If we go and close that, and then go and have a look at the next note, back to the listing, this one here, again I've asked for it to associate the statement to it, and this time you can see that the action code was call. This is a very useful function. It allows us to make sure that while we're generating batch processes, there is also a follow-up where required. The other area that you can generate batch processes within Collect is for letter generation, and we will now have a look at this process. In order to generate letters within Collect, the functionality is exactly the same as that used for statements in terms of using search sets, passing the data onto a process action, and then deciding what that process action will be. The only difference is that with a letter we are working with a Word document rather than with a PDF generated in Report Designer. So, for an example, if we go into search sets and I generate the 30-day search set in the same way as we did before, this will return some results that we can utilise in our processing. So we have a look at this search set. We have a new one that was generated at this time for 30 days and over. We view the results. We have 2 counts that have been associated to this. I'm going to turn this one off so that we don't process it, and process a letter for Aline. I can then click the process actions box and choose the process action that I've set up for letter to student. By clicking OK, again we get the criteria that we examined as part of statement processing. The difference is that instead of clicking the statement generation function, we've clicked the letter generation function. In here, we can then go and choose a letter template that we have designed as part of the setup of the system. These are a number of different templates that we already have. However, you can design and set up whatever template you like. Within the letter, we are able to use text that's set up to work for your organisation, and then we can insert into the letter, where required, data from the collect environment, such as account names, addresses, balances, etc. You can see that in this letter we've added a 7-Day Adventist logo. We've also added some text that changes this to talk about your student fees currently being overdue, and that student admin will contact you, etc. Where the mail merge fields exist, we are passing data into the letter from collect as part of the generation. I will close the letter here, choose this template, and you can see that we've also asked for the system to do exactly as we did for statements, which is to create an entry into the PA document storage and to create an initial note on the account. For this note, you'll see that we're using an action code called letter sent. We're saying that it should be a done note so that it doesn't actually entitle them to have an action or a follow-up, and we've associated the student category to this. This will mean that when the letter is generated, the system will use the student associated to the account rather than the sponsor or the parent in order to specify who will appear on the letter for contact information. I'm going to run the search set. This will perform the search set action and create the letter and associate the note in the same way as it did for statements. When I close this, we can now go and look at an account. I'm going to choose to look at Eileen, and when we do so, the newer note will appear in the listing. So looking down here, we now see that at the top of the list we have a new note. The contact category is Eileen, it is a letter, and we have the free reminder letter sent entry in the note. If I open up this note, we'll see that there's an attached letter, and when I open this, we'll find that it's using the correct template and populating the student details, since it's that contact category we used, into the letter where required. If of course we had used the sponsor category, or indeed the parent category, we will be able to have perhaps a different letter template associated to our process action group in order to allow us to pick the right contact and have different text related to those individuals. This is a batch process, and we are able to generate letters across a large range of accounts in one go, and additionally Collect comes with a tool called Scheduler, which allows you to schedule search sets and action generation. Hence, you could generate statements and letters and send them out overnight at the end of the month where required. Another important consideration in the generation of letters is escalation. In most organisations, there is a need to send out one letter at the point at which an account becomes overdue, and then after a period of time, a second letter may be required to remind them again when no action has been taken. There could be other letters that are generated for further levels of escalation. Collect does allow for this functionality. In order to do this, we utilise an allocation marker on the transactions that have been added to the first level letter that is then made part of the selection criteria in the search set when we generate the second letter. So, for an example, if we look at this search set and we go and run a process action, and when we run the process action, what we should find is we're able to edit the allocation marker that will be added into the transactions when you generate that letter. So, if we look at the process actions here, have a look at our student letter. Down at the bottom of the screen, there is a function that we can use to decide what allocation marker will be added to the transactions that have been included. So, in the data updates after processing area, we can tick this box and then decide that perhaps when we generate letter level 1, all transactions that have been added to that letter will be tagged with a 4. Once that is done, we are then able to utilise this marker as part of the selection criteria in our next letter. So for example, if we were creating a search set that was going to be used to generate level 2 letters, we would actually search based on the allocation marker on the transactions in order to ensure that the right thing is chosen. Hence, I could actually remove all of these and decide level 4 allocation marker was the only transactions that would be included for selection. This is very powerful functionality, and most organisations use it in order to deal with escalation. Search sets are a very powerful tool in general for both inquiries and for generation of statements and letters, and I feel that SDA could utilise these quite extensively to deal with student and sponsor communications and note generation around this. The final area that we're going to look at is the ability within Collect to generate reports. There are extensive reports, and others can be produced on demand. The best way to access reports in Collect is from the tab on the main menu. When we click the tab, you can see that down the left-hand side of the screen it displays a list of the reports that come as standard with Collect. Different businesses use these reports to a different degree. However, there is all the standard reporting required for debtor management, things such as age to detail reports, age summary reports, DSO reports, etc. One of the reports that I actually find most useful is the debt recovery analysis. When we click on the report, you can see that you are presented with a set of parameters that allows you to control the way the report behaves and also to filter information in the report. As you can see, there are some general reporting options. However, you can also make selections based on transactional information, allocation markers, analysis dimensions and T-codes, etc. as required. In this case, I'm going to actually choose a range of accounts. If we have a look at the account range, you can choose our student accounts. In this case, choose a lien, and I'm going to preview the report, although you could actually save the report or print it off if required. When the report is returned, we will see that on this one it breaks down for this particular customer or student the contact details, the last receipt date and amount, the credit limits and payment terms. It then breaks down the aging on the report based on the aging bands that have been defined in Collect, and then shows the number of invoices underneath them. We also have a list of all actions and notes that have been added to account over time, and at the bottom a summary of how many of those actions were acted upon and what users were involved. This is quite useful for an account meeting or potentially just an overall analysis of the account. Most people find these reports useful. However, in Collect there is also the capability to extract Collect notes into a Vision or Q&A report if this is your preferred method of analysis against some systems. That brings us to a conclusion of this demonstration of Collect. I hope it has been useful to you, and it's given some ideas as to potentially how SDA could utilise Collect to better improve their debtor management. Should you have any interest or questions, please feel free to contact your account manager or contact ourselves, and we would be happy to help you. Thank you for your time today.